And certainly this has reached crisis levels here where you see it on the front pages of all the newspapers here in the U.S. What David Cameron said about accepting more, thousands more, is that enough?
First of all, it's good to be back. Thanks for your interest in what is a story that isn't just a political crisis and an economic crisis, but is a moral crisis in Europe. Obviously, with 4 million refugees from the Syria conflict alone, the bulk of them in the neighbouring countries, in Jordan, in Lebanon, no one can say that a few thousand people is enough, but it's a step in the right direction, given that David Cameron was saying on Wednesday 216, which is the current number of people who've gone into the UK as refugees this year from Syria, is enough. The fact that he's moved is a good thing, but there's obviously this problem has to be tackled both at source, the continuing flow of people because of the humanitarian situation in and around Syria, the lack of diplomatic and political progress, and it has to be tackled in Europe, where there are hundreds of thousands of refugees already.
It does seem in the background of the conversations that are happening publicly in Europe is a concern that short-term assistance is going to turn into long-term integration. What should European leaders think about the long-term future of the people who are already within their borders?
I think they should think a couple of things. First of all the history is that refugees become extremely productive members of society. I mean, America is obviously a testimony to that in many ways, but also in Europe, especially from somewhere like Syria, where you've basically got a lot of middle-class people. These are doctors, engineers, teachers, business people who have been expelled from their country by an unspeakable war. Secondly, it's very important to remember that refugees are different from economic immigrants. They're people who have a well-founded fear of persecution. They have rights in international law. The German government has said it expects 800,000 refugee or asylum claims this year, and it's reacted to that calmly. It hasn't started off a panic. In fact, it's saying we need to fulfill our moral and political and legal obligations. And I'm sorry to say this, but historically the US has been a leader in refugee resettlement. Germany has now taken up that mantle because in the US...
But not this time around, right?
Well, in the US, only 1,400 Syrians have been resettled here over the last 4 years, despite successful Syrian-American communities in San Diego, in Detroit.
Yeah. Well, so the Germans have stepped up. The people of Turkey, the government of Turkey has stepped up, but of course, you know, you see in Poland, in Slovakia, and in Hungary and elsewhere, they're not, they don't believe that they should be accepting these refugees, and they want to turn them back. And, you know, as you're aware, the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, this is a quote that he said, "The problem is not European, it's German." He says these refugees want to eventually end up in Germany. Nobody would like to stay in Hungary, neither Slovakia, Poland, or Estonia. All of them would like to go to Germany. So why should they feel, have to deal with this issue when the refugees really want to end up in Germany, in the UK, in Canada, and America?
Look, the truth is, it's a Syrian problem. It's not a German problem or a Hungarian problem. It's fundamentally a Syrian problem, a running sore of international politics, 4 million people expelled from the country by war, 78% of the lights out across Syria, 7 million people displaced within the country, and a war without end, and the options getting worse. So it's a Syrian problem. Frankly, we've got teams in Greece meeting these people as they come off the Mediterranean. We've got teams of people there. The stories they're telling us include one like this. The man said, look, in Aleppo, which is in Syria, we're already dead. And frankly, Slovakia, Hungary, anything is better than being in the middle of Aleppo, and that's what's driving these people to risk life and limb in these terrible scenes that you're seeing to get out of a zone where they feel like their chances of survival are zero.
During the conflict in Yugoslavia, in the mid-90s, you could go into small villages in Germany and you would find clusters of refugees there. Same in Sweden. What are the lessons from the last refugee crisis within Europe on how best to handle people when they've arrived?
It's a great point. There are two big lessons. One is that you've got to address the problem at source as well as within Europe. You've got to stabilise the countries. Thank goodness the countries of the former Yugoslavia, now on the route, many of them to European Union membership, Croatia already in the European Union, you've got to stabilise the problem at source. Secondly, you've got to distribute people. If one country or one community bears the whole burden of integration, it doesn't work. If you spread people out, remember, Europe, as you often say on this show, is the world's largest, richest single market, 500 million people. So 500,000 refugees, frankly, you can do the percentages yourself. You've got to spread them out.
You know, we could have an intellectual and you know, debate about this, but, you know, it's really the heartstrings, right, pulling the heartstrings of the world that I think has brought this, you know, attention. And of course, we all saw the dreadful pictures of the little boy who was washed ashore. And during that time, David, you tweeted out, as did many others, right? The photo, and also you tweeted out these words: if these powerful images of a dead Syrian child on a beach don't change Europe's attitude to refugees, what will? Do you think that we are at a moment where we may be changing our attitude?
I think it's horrible to think about it, but I think Wednesday of this week may have been an inflection point. And that the photo was part of that, but it's also a sense of shame, because that's the word that's been used more often by Europeans than anything other. People say, I'm ashamed of Europe's lack of action. And the question is, how big is the inflection point? Does it lead to more effective action in Greece, where my colleagues can tell you there aren't enough water and sanitation facilities, there aren't enough toilets, there's been real trouble today on the Greek islands where basically they're being overrun, the services are being overrun. Does it lead to a renewed effort to tackle the roots of the problem in Syria? Because frankly, lack of political and diplomatic muscle in the Syria conflict has been a massive problem over the last 4 or 5 years. And does it lead to Europe taking a different view of its own role in the world?